Have you ever felt like you were standing in the middle of an open road, with no destination pulling you forward? Not lost, not broken, just unmoored. Like a ship that slipped its anchor and now drifts on a current it can't name. You know how to work. You know how to endure. But when you sit quietly and ask yourself, what am I building toward? The silence answers back. There was a time when someone else answered that question for you. A boss, a title, a role, a plan someone handed you. And now that it's gone, you don't know where to walk. This is not a flaw. This is not a crisis. This is the condition the ancient Japanese called being Ronin. And the Ronin were the most dangerous men in Japan. Kenji was born into service. His father served the Honda clan, and his grandfather before him. He was given a sword at 14, a stipend at 18, and a post at 22. Every morning, he woke to orders. Every evening, he reported to a master who told him where to stand, what to guard, whom to fight. He never questioned it. The structure was the purpose. The role was the identity. Kenji the samurai. Kenji the retainer. Kenji, who served Honda Masanobu with a loyalty so absolute he would have died without hesitation. Then the decree came. The shogun restructured the domain. The Honda clan was diminished. Retainers were released, stipends revoked, titles dissolved. In a single day, Kenji lost his master, his income, his rank, and the only identity he had ever known. He walked out of the castle gates with 2 swords on his hip and nothing in his chest. No orders, no post, no one to tell him who he was. He drifted, drank, wandered the Tokaido road aimlessly. Men who had been samurai were now nothing. Ronin. The word meant wave man, one who drifts on the surface of the water, pulled by tides he doesn't control. For months, Kenji considered seppuku, the honorable death, the clean exit. Because a samurai without a master was a sword without a sheath, dangerous, purposeless, and slowly rusting. But one morning, sitting beside a river in the eastern provinces, something shifted. He watched the water move, not aimlessly. The river didn't need to be told where to go. It read the terrain. It followed the path of least resistance, yes, but it also carved that path deeper with every passing day. The river had no master, and yet the river never stopped moving. Kenji looked at his swords. He looked at the road ahead. And for the first time in his life, he realized something that terrified him and set him free at the same time. No one was coming to tell him what to do. No one was coming to give him a mission. No one was coming to define his purpose. And that meant he could. He stood up, cleaned his blades, and chose, for the first time in his life, he chose, a direction that was entirely his own. What happened to Kenji isn't unique to him. It lives in all of us. The modern version arrives differently. No shogunal decree, no abolished clan, just a layoff, a retirement, a business that closed, a career path that dead-ended, a relationship that ended and took your 5-year plan with it. You had a master. Maybe the master was a company. Maybe it was a role. Maybe it was a vision of who you were supposed to be by 35, by 40, by 50. And when that master fell away, you were left standing in the same place Kenji stood, armed, capable, and directionless. The ancient Japanese had a word for this condition: Ronin, the wave man, the one who belongs to no one. But here is what they understood and what most people miss. The Ronin was not a failed samurai. The Ronin was a samurai who had been handed the rarest and most terrifying gift in the warrior's life: the freedom to choose his own lord, even if that lord was himself. The word itself is a compass. Ronin, written with 2 characters, Long, the wave, and Run, the person, the wave man, one who moves with the current rather than against it. But here is the reframe the ancients hid inside the term. A wave doesn't drift. A wave carries force. It shapes coastlines. It moves ships. The Ronin who understands his condition doesn't sink into aimlessness. He rides the wave, and the wave becomes his vehicle. Miyamoto Musashi was a Ronin. No master, no clan, no stipend. And he became the greatest swordsman Japan ever produced. Not despite being masterless, but because of it. Every other samurai was constrained by a lord's orders. Musashi was constrained by nothing except his own standard. Modern psychology has a name for this. Self-concordant goals. Goals that align with your authentic self rather than someone else's expectations. Research from the University of Rochester shows that people who pursue self-concordant goals experience higher well-being, greater persistence, and lower burnout than those chasing externally imposed targets. The Ronin, when he chooses his own mission, is operating from the deepest layer of motivation that exists. Your practice is simple. Stop asking, "What should I do?" That question assumes a master. Ask instead, "What would I do if no one was watching, no one was grading, and no one was coming to approve it?" The answer that rises in the silence, that is your wave. There is a concept the samurai held above nearly all others, Kakugo. It translates roughly as readiness, but not the passive kind. Not ready in case something happens. Kakugo is the settled, resolved readiness of someone who has already decided. When Kenji served the Honda clan, his readiness was borrowed. He was ready because his master told him what to be ready for. The moment the clan dissolved, that borrowed readiness evaporated, and Kenji mistook the emptiness for purposelessness. But the emptiness wasn't the absence of direction, it was the absence of borrowed direction. And until you stop reaching for someone else's compass, you'll never develop your own. Kakugo, in its truest form, is the readiness to move on your own command, not waiting, not preparing, but already decided. The sword is already drawn in the mind before the hand moves. Modern neuroscience describes this as the difference between reactive and proactive executive function. When you operate from borrowed readiness, your prefrontal cortex is essentially in standby, waiting for external instructions to trigger action. When you cultivate Kakugo, you activate what researchers call endogenous intention, the capacity to self-initiate behavior from internal decisions rather than external cues. This is the neurological signature of a self-directed life. Your practice. Choose one decision you've been deferring, one that sits in the fog of, "I'll figure it out later." Don't solve it. Don't act on it. Just decide. Right now. Kakugo doesn't require the right answer. It requires a committed one. The readiness is in the commitment, not the perfection. The Ronin who thrived didn't stay still. They walked. Musha Shugyo, the warrior's pilgrimage. It was a tradition older than the Ronin himself, a practice where a samurai left his domain and traveled the country to test his skill against other schools, other fighters, other philosophies. It was not tourism, it was forge work. Every dojo was a crucible, every encounter a mirror. For the Ronin, Musha Shugyo became something more. It wasn't just about sharpening the sword, it was about discovering the mission. You don't find your path by sitting in a room and thinking. You find it by walking into the world and letting the world tell you what you're made for. Musashi's Musha Shugyo lasted decades. He fought over 60 duels, he lost none. But more importantly, he discovered, through combat, through travel, through encounter after encounter, that his true calling wasn't the sword. It was the philosophy of the sword. He became a painter, a calligrapher, a philosopher. The Book of Five Rings was written by a Ronin, in a cave, in the final years of his life, with no master to serve, but the truth itself. Your Musha Shugyo doesn't require a sword, it requires movement. If you've been standing still, waiting for clarity to arrive before you move, you've reversed the order. Clarity doesn't precede movement. Movement precedes clarity. The path appears under your feet, not in your mind. Your practice. Pick one thing you've been curious about but haven't tried. Not a career pivot, not a 5-year plan, just one thing. A class, a conversation, a book outside your usual field, a skill you've never touched. Walk toward it. The pilgrimage isn't about the destination. It's about what the road reveals about the walker. The final concept is the one the Ronin feared most. Jiyu, freedom. Not the freedom of leisure, not the freedom of doing nothing. Jiyu is the freedom of self-mastery, the condition where nothing external commands you because nothing external needs to. You've become your own authority, your own standard, your own lord. This is where most people recoil, because freedom is heavier than servitude. When someone else defines your purpose, the weight is shared. When you define your own, the weight is entirely yours. This is why so many Ronins sought new masters, not because they couldn't survive alone, but because the uncertainty of self-authority was more frightening than any battlefield. It's easier to follow orders than to write your own. But the Ronin who embraced Jiyu, those were the ones history remembered. Musashi, Tsukahara Bokuden, Kamiizumi Nobutsuna, men who turned masterlessness into a discipline more rigorous than any lord could impose. This practice is the hardest one. Stop looking for someone to tell you you're on the right path. Stop seeking permission. Stop waiting for the boss, the mentor, the algorithm, the market, the universe to validate your direction. The moment you stop seeking approval for your path is the moment the path becomes yours. That is Jiyu. Not the absence of authority, but the presence of your own. Kenji walked the Tokaido road for years after that morning by the river. He never found another master. He didn't need to. He became a teacher, not of swordsmanship, of the one thing he'd learned that no master could have taught him: how to stand when no one tells you where to stand. You are not lost. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are Ronin. And the road ahead is not empty. It is unwritten. Name one direction you've been afraid to walk. Write it in the comments. Not the plan, not the 10 steps, just the direction. The act of naming it in the presence of others is the first step of Musha Shugyo. The warrior's pilgrimage begins with a spoken direction. I'll see you in the next one. Keep rising.